I just woke up. It's like 10:40 a.m. There's a huge promo going on at Maryland Live today. $1,000 high hand every 15 minutes. There's already huge wait lists. They're not answering the phone. Promo doesn't even start for another 20 minutes. So instead of eating over here and meandering over there, I'm gonna get ready as quick as possible, drive over there, get on the list for every game, and then I will eat over there and maybe just wander around the mall for a little bit, kill some time, because I imagine I could easily be on a wait list for like 2 hours. Literally just got back yesterday from LA, but hard to miss, a promo like this. And Mickey's actually at like an all-day thing for work today, even though it's Saturday. Let's just get back to the grind. Let's go. This plan kind of backfired because even just in the time it took me to get ready, there is a list of like 250 on the 1-2 and at like 80 on the 2-5, but they did open a decent amount of 1-3s, and there's only like 40 people in that right now. That should bump back up as 1-2 people start to transfer over to it. But I think now we'll be still looking at a reasonable wait, so something like an hour and a half instead of like 2 or 3 hours. I'm going over there now, gonna eat lunch, hopefully get in a game. Let's do it. About 12:30 now, and I just checked Bravo. The lists have really stabilized out, which is good. They're still very large, but they've stabilized, which means probably they won't grow a lot bigger in the next a little while that it takes me to kind of get over there. But they're still big, so they definitely won't run out anytime soon. I don't know what just happened with my camera there, but basically there's 250 on the 1-2 list and something like, where's this elevator? There's something like 50 or 60 on the 1-3 and the 2-5 lists each, which is fine. I think they'll be moving pretty quickly if if they're already kind of opening up. So that's good. They're up to 51 tables, and I think there's 52 tables in the room. So should be pretty cool. Definitely looking to get into 2-5, but don't mind if I start at 1-3. Probably just gonna avoid 1-2 altogether though.
this session came pretty much right after my LA trip, which I know it's been a while since I actually did a full proper vlog, and a little behind on content here, so thanks for your guys' patience with that. This was a weird day because of this crazy promo going on at Maryland Live. I felt like in general the play was much more passive, just a lot more trying to see hands, especially I actually started out the 1-3 level, moved up to 2-5 later on, and this is just going to be my 2-5 session. And because it was so crowded, I just kind of ended up running into more people on this day than I typically run into when I go to Maryland Live for a normal just weekend session. Met Brian James, I met Ryan, and I also met Adam, I think right after I signed up for the list. You actually like ran out to see me, so I appreciate you guys coming and saying hi. So there's one interesting thing that happened before I got in and sat down for 2-5. I was called for a seat, went over to the 2-5 game, and it turns out that there was a guy who was technically in front of me on the list. So while I was waiting for the button to pass, which was just 1 or 2 hands, he came over too, and the floor basically said that I had to wait. Now that was going to be his seat. So I didn't make a big stink out of it. I knew it was probably going to be quick. There's a lot of turnover. Basically every table was full, if not every table. So I got up and waited. It was only another like 5 or 10 minutes. Headed on back, and it was actually, I was put at the same table. I was put at the table just 1 seat over from where I would have been. And the guy looks sheepishly over at me and says, "I hit the high hand." I'm like, "What do you mean you hit the high hand?" And it's like, he sat down, and within, 3 or 4 hands, like within the time it took me to be seated again, he hit quad aces, it held up, and he was paid $1,000 right there in front of me, because the period ended probably 2 or 3 minutes after I sat down for real. And so he gets paid out $1,000, and nobody else like got up or left. There wouldn't have been anything different from, me being in the game versus him being in the game. I would have played it the same way, because he had pocket aces and he saw a flop and he flopped quad aces. But this guy just came out and did something that was really unnecessary, and I think honestly kind of blew me away in the moment. He got paid out in $100 chips at the table, and he tossed me a $100 chip. And I tried to give it back to him, because I said, that's not necessary. That's your promo money. You don't need to do that. But he insisted, and at some level, I felt kind of bad in that moment, because I don't think I would have done that. And I really don't think it's necessary, by the way. I don't feel like I'm a bad person if I don't do that. But it just made me feel a lot better about the whole situation. And yeah, I really appreciate it. It was really nice of that guy to do. And again, totally unnecessary. Being the guy that I am, I just put the $100 on top of my stack to keep it in play, and kind of give everybody a shot at it, since really nothing I did warranted getting that $100 except happening to be being seated on that table too. For example, if I hadn't actually been seated on that same table, I never would have gotten that $100 either. So I just put it in play, and we moved on from there. But of course, right away, there was kind of a friendly rapport at the table between me and this gentleman on my left. Didn't really play in because we didn't actually play any hands together, but figured that was worth sharing. All right, enough of the friendly camaraderie. Let's get into the war. Let's get into the hands. Let's try to book a win. Let's go. So in this first hand, there's a limp. I open with king queen suited in middle position to 20. The big blind and the early position limp are both call. The flop comes king 6-3 two-tone. Checks to me, I see bet 45, and the big blind is the only caller. The turn is the 4 of spades, which brings in the flush, and he now leads into me for 85. Kind of an awkward situation. Feels a little too weak to fold right now, but at the same time, it'd be kind of hard for him to have bluffs here, so I don't really love this spot. I did decide to call one more time, planning to reevaluate the river, but I like a call a lot better if I at least have the queen of spades in my hand or something like that. The river ends up bricking out. He leads for 150 now, and this is just not close. It's definitely a fold now, so I let it go, and he's going to take that first one down. In this next hand, I missed the blinds and I'm in the cutoff, so I do decide to post rather than wait the extra like 7 hands. So I post the $7 and 2 of it's dead in the middle. There's 3 limpers. I check with Queen Jack offsuit. The small blind completes and the big blind checks. So we're quickly off to a 6-way flop. Flop top pair on Jack 6-3 monotone, and I actually have the Queen of Diamonds here, so top pair and a pretty good flush draw. Like in this situation so far. The small blind leads for 15 and it folds around to me. I mean, I don't beat like a lot of hands that make sense for him to lead, but there are a few, and I do have equity against his made flushes, his 2 pairs, stuff like that. So we go heads up to a turn now. The turn comes the King of Hearts now, and he leads again for 40. Really not in love with the situation, although the King is actually kind of a good card because it eliminates some combos of King Jack he could have. I do make the call one more time. I'm probably folding here if I don't have the Queen of Diamonds though. The river comes a 10, it's offsuit, and he checks. At this point, I'm actually feeling okay about my hand, although it's a little bit hard to put him on a hand that would check a brick river after betting flop and turn, since I don't necessarily think he would be betting Jack 10 for value twice. But I do go ahead and check behind. I don't think there's any reason to turn this hand into a bluff. I think I have some showdown value, even if I can't figure out exactly what hands it's against. But he ends up showing Jack 6, and he's going to take this one down. So not off to the best of starts. Lost a couple hands right away. Not huge ones, but just kind of weird, tricky situations where people are getting kind of passive with pretty good hands. So going to see that as a theme kind of throughout this session. In this hand, there's 2 limps. I have Ace-Jack offsuit, and I raised 30 on the button. Pretty solid hand. Pretty solid position. The big blind cold calls, and middle position, who is a limper, also calls. The flop comes Jack 10-9 rainbow, so I flop top pair, but it's not really an ideal situation. There's a lot of hands that beat us. There's a lot of hands that don't beat us but have a ton of equity. But I do have top pair. I do expect to get called by worse. Where was I? This pot is kind of big though, so picking my bet sizing was a little awkward. I don't know if I love it. I ended up c-betting $60 and I get just 1 caller. The turn's an offsuit deuce. He checks to me. I go ahead and bet 100, definitely trying to aim on the small side now and almost certainly checking back the river if he calls, unless it's like a jack or an ace, in which case I would probably feel obligated to value bet again. He, however, ends up check raising to 400, and without any kind of read, this is just a snap fold. I have a ton of better hands in my range that can call, and Ace-Jack is losing to every value hand in his range. We certainly have better bluff catchers, so I just let it go. Hard to really see me beating much here. In this hand, I open pocket kings to 25 on the button over 1 limper. The big blind, who is the same villain from the previous hand, ends up making the call. The flop is Ace-Jack 9, and when he checks, I make a pretty typical check back. The turn's a queen, he bets 25, and I make a call. Again, I think pretty standard. Not really much choice here when I check back the flop. The river's a brick, and he checks. I check it back expecting to win like 90% of the time, but he unfortunately shows me Ace-10 and gets the better of me once again. So I'd be in a little bit of a tough spot if he bet, but again, people were playing pretty passive. Seems like a lot of people were really just there for the promo, getting in whatever game they could, and just trying to make some hands. In this hand, I'm on the cutoff with King 4 of clubs. I open to 20, and everybody calls. So the button, small blind, big blind are all in there. I'm definitely one of the more active players at the table, but this wasn't really happening. We weren't getting like tons of super multi-way pots, especially from late position opens. The flop ends up becoming ace queen 5 with 2 clubs. Unfortunately, the ace is not the club, so it's a little bit trickier. We can get ourselves into somewhat trickier spots, and that actually kind of ends up happening in this hand. Spoiler alert, I guess. I see bet 65, and the button doesn't wait. He wants to put the money in now. He jams for 190 total, folds back to me, and I have an interesting decision here. It's 125 to call, and even though I'm getting kind of a good price, it's a little bit awkward when the ace is not a club on the board because he can just kind of go with an ace when he has the nut flush draw. But I do decide I'm probably getting the right price barely. Call it off. The turn's a queen, the river's an ace, so there's now 2 pair on the board. Any ace of his makes a boat. Any queen, if he would play it super weird, makes a boat. It's hard to see what I'm beating now, but he says I missed and shows 9-8 of clubs. So that was pretty much the only hand that I could beat with this exact run out. I turn it over, and king high is good. In this hand, the button and the small blind both limp in. I'm on the big blind with ace king offsuit, and I bump it up to 30. The button's the only caller. The flop comes 9-6-3 with 2 hearts. I throw out a c-bet of 40, and he makes the call. The turn's a 9, and I check. He bets 75, and even though on the surface, I don't really have anything, and I don't really have any equity against his value hands, when the 9 pairs, it's just a lot harder for him to have his value hands. And I think a lot of players are checking back their small pairs here on the turn. When he bets 75, I think there's a pretty good chance he's just got a draw. There's still a bunch of them out there, and I can still potentially catch an ace or a king if he does have something like pocket 8s or pocket 7s, I guess. So I call, and we go heads up to a river. The river is the 7 of clubs, which I deem to be not the best card in the world, but not the worst either. I think I still have enough showdown value to just check and probably check fold, but I think he'll check back with a lot of his bluffs on the river. I'm not really sure though, so I'm definitely willing to evaluate after he bets, and based on the sizing and just looking at him, decide if I want to call. He ends up checking it behind though. I turn it over, and he's got 8-7. So I was right about him kind of just having a draw in this exact situation, but this time he caught up, and that's going to happen sometimes, so he gets pushed the pot this time. In this hand, I open ace-king offsuit to 20 for middle position. Hijack player calls. The big blind, who is kind of on the tight side but not super deep, makes it 80. Folds around to me, and I think the big blind only has like 200 or 300 here. Maybe 350. I didn't actually write down his stack. My bad. But anyway, I just decided to jam, which I think is pretty standard. And as long as we're like fairly well below 100 big blinds, this is no problem. Hijack thinks for a while, but does ultimately end up folding. Board rolls out pretty solid for us. It's king 8-7-7, and just for good measure, in case he had aces, there's another king on the river. So we really don't lose to anything. We'll occasionally chop with ace king, but he doesn't show. I just turned it over right away. He throws it in the muck, and we finally take down a decent one here. And that was about it. There were a few hands that I saved from the session to probably go off in like one-off hand review videos, since there's been some positive response to that so far, and I would like to get into a habit of having that just to kind of fill in the spaces in between some of the vlogs that are more spaced out than I'd like, because I can't always get them out, multiple per week. So with that, I ended up being definitely down for the session, but not by much. I ended up in the game for kind of a weird amount because I came from 1-3. So I came into the game for 763, topped off for 100 from the guy who just gave it to me, added on another 400 after I got a little bit short, and I ended up cashing out for 745. So I ended up, I think, down exactly 555. If I'm not mistaken. No, what was I down? 5. It was 5 something. Anyway, so I lost about a buy-in there, but that's not really a huge deal. Kind of just standard, and as you can see from a lot of these hands, they were sort of just things where I was forced into kind of awkward situations, and they kind of could have gone either way, maybe on one street, but I certainly wasn't going to have a big winning session either way. Don't forget to subscribe. I know I've been talking about a meetup game for ages, but I promise I'm still working on it. It's just kind of pushed to the back burner. We'll be getting on it. Just be patient with me. Remember to like this video, subscribe, leave me a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.